talking about technology, not only is it flipping society on its head, it's actually flipping the art industry on its head as well.
Ooh, do tell me more.
So there is an interesting situation happening with the Barnes Foundation, which is an art gallery located in Philadelphia. And to give you a little bit of backstory before we really dive into the main meat of the article, which is presented by Digital Trends, but the gallery itself was founded by Albert C. Barnes, who was a doctor, and he had, to many people in the art world, a very unconventional perspective. Instead of gathering art, whether it be furniture, jewelry, photography, blanket weaving, any kind of art that you can consider, instead of him correlating his gallery based on where they were made. So for instance, this is our section from Italy, or this is our section from France, or instead of tagging it in by like time frame. Oh, well, this is 1700s to the 1820s, and this is from the 1830s to the 1890s or whatever. He decided to go by the visual look of things. He thought that for people who aren't into the arts world, really what's important to people is what they see. So what kind of information do they gather from the piece of art based on their eyes, and then how their brain basically works that information through into a better understanding of that artwork. And so with this, over time, his gallery has grown and grown and really pushed this concept of just association by visualization, I guess. And he passed away, I believe, around the 1950s. But the art gallery still continues and still tries to hold true to this concept of how to curate art. Well, just recently, their foundation decided to launch an online art gallery. So now all of the art has been digitized and placed on their website. But it's not just any sort of culmination of work or digitization of work. Because what they did was they actually reached out to several machine learning organizations and doctorates who study machine learning, and had different systems review and categorize the art. And within this huge concept, something interesting that they learned, by the way, as kind of a side note here, was that for the most part, machines and these machine learning systems look at art the way people do, without that sort of, I guess, secondary buffer or way of reviewing the art. So like without saying, what I want to say, like, without having that filter of saying, hey, this is actually what this is. Basically what this machine would do is say, they would look at bearded images and go, okay, we're going to categorize these as Jesus. And that's what the system did, because it went, oh, beard. And what do a lot of children do? Well, they kind of go by association. And so they'll categorize things just by how it kind of looks too.
Without really second guessing themselves.
Without second guessing. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I was trying to think of that phrase, like, yes, without second guessing themselves. And so they found this was very interesting as well. The fact that these machines would just kind of go off of gut instinct based off of what it learned, and then how it categorized things. And as you can see in the image, if you're watching us here live on Twitch, is the actual system they've put in place here. And you can see where they'll color coordinate all the artwork, jewelry, furniture, pottery, glasswares, you name it, into specific colors. How the lines are within the piece of artwork. Are they straight? Are they perpendicular? Do they kind of curve around the body of work in a certain way? Also the light, how it shows and displays light and shadows, the amount of space within the artwork, and much more. And all this, instead of being digitized by an individual, multiple people, they had these machine programs do it for them. And it's fascinating to think that these systems are looking at it in a way that a human being would initially, which is also very fascinating. And so what's even cooler about this system is not only did they create it for themselves, they also created it for everyone else. So this software that they finally created, this interface, is open source. So now other institutions, other museums can utilize this same system to digitize their artwork and get it out to a broader mass of people. And to me personally, now coming from like my perspective, I think this is fantastic. Now, many of you probably say, well, what's the focus in driving people to museums in the first place? But the problem is that we're seeing a decline in the amount of people attending those locations in the first place anyway. They're not going to the museums as much anymore. They're not going to the institutions as much anymore. And it's not to say that that makes you a bad person or a better person or anything like that, but they're just not really going in attendance. And so this is a great way for these institutions to share amazing pieces of artwork throughout multiple lifetimes here, and to broaden the horizons of how people look at art, interpret art, and what do they assume is art, and really get their own perspective on what it is. I think many people do think that, oh, well, it's for stuffy people, and why do I want to go to a museum? That's boring. But at least if they can view it on their own terms, it might actually open the gateways for more people to have a better appreciation or a better, at least, understanding of the type of art and the story it tells.
I don't know. I mean, going to museums it's just for school trips.
Yeah.
It's just to get out of school, guys. That's all it's for.
That's right. It's
not about, enlightenment, creativity, different points of view. It's just to get out of math class. There's a lot to unpack here. Between making art more accessible to AI and how it will take over the world. No, and just the fact that someone decades ago wanted to change how art was viewed, and that his legacy's pretty much still going. That's pretty cool.
Well, and I think he has a point too. I feel like many people gravitate to a certain style or a certain color palette, and because that's just initially what we see, that's initially what we experience and what invokes the initial emotion, whether it's a Rembrandt, a Monet, or whether it's Picasso or anyone for that matter. I mean, it doesn't matter the artist, right? Like, we initially look at it, at least most of us look at it and go, oh, I love the shadows. I love the specific blues they used in this. And that I hear that all the time if I attend a museum. Most of the time I'm hearing people looking at the artwork, not familiar with the artist, but going, oh, I just love the shadowing here, or the shades, or the details on the face. And that right there, you could tell like what they like, right? If they're talking about the details of a face, most likely they're going to love portraits of people. Maybe not so much like a Monet piece of like lilies on the pond, but they might gravitate more toward real people, for example. And because that's our initial gut instinct, to have art curated in that sense does actually make sense on an initial level for people who aren't big followers of current arts or past arts, whether it's the Renaissance period up until now or what have you.
Like me, I can't say I'm a history buff or an art buff or anything like that, but I do know that when I see a piece of art, whether it's a painting or a statue or what did you say, a weaved basket? Yeah,
a woven basket.
A woven basket, English. I just kind of know what it makes me feel. I don't think I even have those kinds of detailed thoughts about like shadows and like the details, but rather I look at a piece of artwork personally and like I either go, wow, that's cool, and I want to keep staring at it, or with some like abstract stuff, for example, like I'm definitely not an abstract kind of gal, because I look at it, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is happening here. Please take this away from me. Why is everybody oohing and eyeing? What am I missing? Like, what do you see? I love portraits. I love things that look almost like they're a photograph, that kind of stuff, in terms of paintings and on statues and everything. Like, I like things that actually look more real than not, right? But it is interesting to have, to me, I think it's awesome to actually have a digitized version of a museum, if you will. Like, obviously you can't quite get the exact same feelings that you would when you go to a museum where you see the artwork in that space where it's supposed to be viewed, like especially if it's like a 3D thing, but also even colors, right? Like your monitor might be set to a certain types of color, and the painting may not look like how exactly the painter intended it to, etc., etc. Museums do a pretty good job of displaying artwork in whatever type of it is, in a way that really makes it pop, right? And it really makes it be able to be consumed, as it were, all by itself, right? But it's nice to have it digitized because there's also, you can see more at once, right? Or you can just see more, you can experience more, and you're able to sort of do it by yourself. Like I always feel when I go to museums, and I love going to museums, even the weird abstract ones where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. But I always feel like this pressure, like, well, I'm supposed to react a certain way to this art. I'm supposed to have some idea of what it is. And so I kind of like the concept of also being able to look at something in my own time and kind of come to my own conclusion and not worry about like, oh, what do I look like to other people when I'm experiencing this art or this and that. And if I want to make a face, and I can, and nobody will judge me for it and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. And it's neat to hear that even AI, right? Even computer software looks at art and is like, this is Jesus. You're like, what? It's a dude with a beard. What? Come on. What are you doing? And it's nice that, code doesn't even have preconceived notions necessarily. Well, I guess it does have preconceived notions because they think that Jesus had this particular type of beard, but
they don't have the fact of a huge arts education behind them. And so it's just kind of really looking at like anyone who might not be familiar with a type of art or artist, like what their initial reaction is, which is kind of cool to see. Like, for instance, another example that they gave besides the Jesus beard situation where they were categorizing anyone with a beard as Jesus, but they were also categorizing nude women within paintings as teddy bears.
I mean, you get to hug them and they're round and soft.
Well, and I think that's the point too, is some of it is based on the shape, right? Like what the shape was back then in comparison to kind of what the ideal shape, and I'm using quotations for those that are listening to the podcast, but air quotes, but the ideal shape of what we kind of look at as sexual or sensual in now's time, in today and now. So I think it's really interesting that it kind of sees that based on what it's kind of given, right? It's given shapes, it's given colors, it's given certain kinds of descriptions, and it just says go, and that's what comes out. So it's really interesting, and it makes us re-look at some of the things that these machine systems are looking at and go, oh, actually, that's kind of fascinating. Because the funny story is that when these machine learning specialists came back with the results, they said, oh, I'm sorry, like this did not work out as planned. They screwed up. We don't know what happened here. And the art curators and the people at the foundation looked at it and went, actually, no, that's not off, really. We can actually kind of see where they're coming from with that. So that's really intriguing. And also, RX Mongo makes a really interesting point in chat. He says this is kind of revolutionary. Not everyone knows the art they want to see, or the fact that even they want to see it in the first place, or how to find it. But being able to explore like this in specific categories could really open up people's minds. Exactly. Like if I want to look up something that's blue, I mean, I may not know the specific kind of blue, but I can pick a swath of a blue color, which they can in this program, and I can get all the artwork with that in there. It's a good place to start. You need some kind of initial step, and this can give that to you.
Yeah, and there's two things that I want to actually touch on that, expand on that a little bit further. It's sort of like Netflix, right? Or like Hulu. Like you've watched some stuff, but maybe you haven't watched some stuff, and you're first creating an account. It'll kind of recommend some things to you.
Right.
And it'll be like, oh, well, these are trending in your area for people your age and your gender, maybe. And maybe that's how they do it when you first log in, right? And then as it kind of figures out your taste, it'll be like, oh, well, here's some other things that you maybe will enjoy. And then sometimes I look at that algorithm, I'm like, wrong. But every now and again, it's like, oh yeah, this movie was dope, right? So yeah, kind of like what Mongo was saying, that kind of for the people who may not even know that they want to look at art or what art they should look at or anything like that, this is a great way of kind of exploring that. The other thing I was thinking of is there's a lot of like stock imagery or stock footage sites, stock imagery sites that actually sort the materials that they have in there. They give you the option to sort it by things like color or shape or something else in the composition. So it's like this is not new in terms of, you know, how people do want to view things and how they make connections visually. We are a highly visual race, no matter what anybody tells you, right? Like our eyesight and everything that is around us is so built on sight. You know, try to go out into the world and try to function with your eyes closed. It's intense, right? Like you gotta just kind of change how you do everything. And so the fact that, you know, there's already sites where the, you know, visual curation of items is already in place. And so now to bring, and I'm sure that was potentially at some point started to be done, it was done by other humans, right? Like they looked at an image and were like, yeah, this is blue, this is this other blue. But now there's machines that can do this. You know, there's AI, there's software that, again, another human wrote probably. But yeah, so it's cool. It's a cool thing.
Yeah, and I think that it's only going to benefit people, honestly. You know, Manga also says, I love the color purple. Oh, wow, I didn't know art from, you know, example, the 1850s had this style and contained purple. Right, exactly. And also...
Twitch purple.
I want to look for Twitch purple. Can you give me that? Maybe not that specific. But also, too, just from different countries. You know, and especially countries that might not get the amount of attention that certain other countries do. For instance, many of us can say, oh yeah, Germany, we have these painters or these sculptors, or from England, or from maybe even Ireland. But like, for instance, India, we don't know a lot about. Or for instance, with China, we may see a lot of their artwork, but don't know the artists. And so this is a great way of seeing some of the things we may be familiar with or not familiar with. And again, not only build a better appreciation for art overall, all over the place, but to better understand the culture from which that art stems from. Because that's what really art is about. It's about telling a story, whatever that story may be. And so, you know, you can learn so much from a culture just based on the artwork. You know, you can understand a lot of the strife and I guess horrors of war, especially during the Spanish War. If you look at some of the artwork from Picasso, for example, that's very prevalent in a lot of his work. And you can see this in many other artists. And I'll go, oh my God, I didn't realize this huge revolution happened. I didn't realize that, you know, these many people were impacted by this situation. And then you just better understand things. You know, you start seeing kind of like the puzzle pieces fall into place and connect. I think that's so awesome. And, you know, art is just one way of telling that story and getting those pieces to finally really connect, you know?
Yeah, well, and art is, you know, it's the YouTube, it's the films, it's the memes, it's the GIFs, it's the tweets. That's still art, right? That's the art of today, anyways. And I think it's, you know, it's easy to forget that in the past, the art of today was like that. It was paintings, and it was artists using the art medium to speak, to have their voice heard.
Oh yeah, and that's not to say, of course, that these arts still aren't relevant or still aren't huge and amazing. That's not what we're saying at all, but we're saying that technology has also come into play for this and has really created its own kind of artwork, even if it is Kermit the Frog drinking a Lipton tea. But, you know, it's a way of expressing an emotion or an intention or a way of the culture. And you can learn a lot, even just from the emotes used and what's behind, as we talked about when we talked about last week with emoji. You know, will it become the new language, the apocalypse of what we know as linguistics? And, you know, when we dove into that last week, I think this is where we came to at this point now, which is where, well, it's still telling a story. There's still intent. Will it end all language as we know? Probably not. Our vote is no. 2 thumbs down. But overall, I just really think it's interesting that we're seeing even the impact of what art can do on a much bigger scale, on a small scale, such as communication online.